Hello, back with another Keyframe Coach review. This is a shot from Lauren. It's called Godzilla, and you'll see why when we play it through. Let's have a look. Nice. Super fun shot. Cool. So Lauren's added as well on the sync sketch. I think these first 12 frames spacing is too fast, but I'm not sure how to fix that retroactively. And also not sure how well this take at the end is working. That's cool. So first of all, those 12 frames didn't stand out as super jarring to me. If anything, I think you could like have this relate a bit more to this next pose, so that maybe he's already looking there at the thing. Just looking down. Potentially this head could be turned a bit more. If that doesn't completely ruin his silhouette, he could just be more looking down, ready to go. Bit more rotate Z as well. I'm going to turn on tracing paper because I always forget to do that. And I'm going to change to red. Cool. But honestly, fixing spacing retroactively, I feel like is a case of going in and adjusting your frames, or just spacing things out a little bit more on the timeline to have more timing happen. But for me, it didn't stand out as super harsh. I think if anything, it hits a little bit hard here in this up pose. And I think for me that is just boom. Like maybe just wants to have a little bit more flow to that hand. Let's have a look. I feel like you're kind of doing this pose, and maybe that could even be pushed a bit more to get into that final thing, and then you want to kind of start that reversal. Let's say arm is doing this. I kind of feel like you could potentially have that pushed, but also have that not feel so pose to pose. Like kind of go, ugh, smack. It could kind of almost be like a raise up, and then as it reaches the point, your chest kind of starts to turn, and then the arm is kind of already starting to ease out and just overlap. Oh god, I just whacked my mic. Oh. But you're like kind of to feel less pose to pose, you then start easing out with that and just having some of that spacing start to come into that next pose, which might help to break up that pose to pose feel and alleviate some of the spacing that you were talking about. Hope my mic's still working. Yeah, a good smack. So for example, down here, we might be already kind of coming into this. The chest might be leading around a bit more. And then when we get to here, we're maybe in something like this. Just to alleviate some of that pose to pose feel. It's kind of nice that you start like leaning back with that elbow. I think you could just have that delayed a bit just to get a little bit more flow through that arm. See how that's going to then hook up to that nicely. And then here, I feel like the arc is kind of, it's a valid arc to go like under and up. I'm going to be careful of my mic doing that. But it's a valid arc, but I feel like the end pose, the settle, isn't selling that kind of like uppercut feel that this breakdown here has. I feel like it feels more like a side swipe where you're coming through and like kind of settling here rather than coming up and down in that kind of arc. So I would make this more of a, I don't know, just a bit more stacked. Kind of, you want to do this kind of arc through there. So maybe the hand is, you could even break that joint. Could be cool. Potentially. Opportunity for a nice smear in there or something. Just so that arc doesn't go so low and then settle in such a kind of, it feels like the arc should be that if you're going to do it that low, and right now it kind of feels like you're settling into this at the end here. So I choose one or the other, or one or the other even. And then I feel like this hold is nice. This doesn't feel too pose to pose. I feel like a lot of the shot you could do with breaking up the rhythm of different parts and the spacing of different parts just to break that up and have it not feel so pose to pose. So here it kind of feels like all of the spacing, like the spacing isn't necessarily the same, but the amount that the spacing is changing is the same. So if we take a look at like this pose here, this down. So if I look at this jaw, and then I take a look at this arm, it's kind of, it's not the same spacing because the spacing is this much between these two and it's this much between these two, but the rate of the spacing change is similar. So this one is maybe doing this and this one is maybe doing this, which gives them, you know, if you put that on a timing, on a spacing chart, it might look something like this, and then the other one might look something like this. And I think it'd be better to have things just feel a little bit more like this at times, and then maybe do something different. Just break up that spacing on what things are doing, but also have things not feel like they settle all at the same time. So I just go through and kind of do a pass on different bits. You see how here everything is kind of settling. It would be nice if like the arm, for example, was still coming through just to delay that spacing a bit more. So say it ends up here, and in this pose we could be more over here with this, just to break that up. Which will then give you kind of a way to lead into that as well. So he's kind of gone down there, and then the arm can lead that up, and it's not just getting into a pose, holding it, everything bursting out, everything happening at the same time. So you could potentially even have this kind of really push that spacing. So that starts to then lead that whole motion up. And then here you could maybe like delay the head, have this arm burst through. Ooh. And when we see this tail, I feel like it would be nice to have the tail in shot at all times. There's, to me, there's not a super good reason to lose it on that frame. I mean, mechanically, it might be the case, or if you shot reference of someone doing this, it might be the case. But just for in terms of like 2D clarity, we can probably cheat the spacing a bit just to have that tail on screen at all times if possible. Unless obviously it's moving very slowly and he's doing like a slow turn or something. But where we're really pushing this and going and doing super cartoony stuff, I feel like it kind of calls for the tail being on show at all times. And you could just come under a bit more with this arc as well when it goes over like that. Just to settle up into this. I think a key thing to look at is like have a look at all of your body parts individually and what their spacing is doing, and if everything feels like it's kind of resolving at the same time, or almost like the entire pose is easing in at the same time, then something can lead that, something can drag behind that, and you can just break it up a little bit more. I think this pose is really nice. Looking at the toe, just started focusing on the toe there. I do feel like you could kind of pivot on this toe a little bit more. So this is nice what you have here. Kind of feels like, I don't know, he feels kind of ploddy in this outfit. It's like he's just plodding along. Very nice. And then when we get to this next pose, I feel like we can just turn a bit more on this and potentially have similar to the cat shot that we were looking at before, I guess. But what would it be? Guess you would have something just a bit more in this realm, potentially. And maybe this can be kind of one, can just lead into that a bit more. This is nice how it's all one line through there. But you see how the toe would kind of, I guess I drew that a little wrong. But if we look at where this toe is, it would kind of pivot from here and end up, I guess, sort of in this region. And that'll just feel a bit more anatomically correct. Show up on your toe. I think that makes sense. Maybe it's not super 2D like that, but you get the idea. Maybe it's not so around like that. It's more in this region. It'd probably feel nice. And then it wouldn't feel like he's kind of got this leg here and we're kind of dragging this broken ankle along. So you can just have a compression in there. Again, similar to a cat where, you know, we just get a little raise up. We go from here to, sorry, we go from this green pose to just bending forward into that red pose. And then I think you can keep that simpler in the leg when you come up here. Like it can be much closer to what this pose is with this foot. So there's no reason to kind of go over there and then there. It's just going to be a distraction. We can just like hold it. Maybe this. Maybe it doesn't even lift up just yet. It's just a shape, but you get what I mean. That's just gonna have this nicer sort of flow to it. Would kind of be nicer looking at this pose here with the compression. No, I like him on his heel actually. I was kind of thinking he could have like some kind of cat thing, but no, his weight's all there. I think that's right. He could potentially just get something a little bit like this. Feels nice. The whole knee and this is good. It feels like when we come in here, there's just maybe a bit more room. Or maybe because we are leaning so far over, you can maybe just get this heel up just a tiny bit. And you could potentially have just a bit more of a nicer kind of line through here. Like it's getting all a bit crumpled through here. So just see what you can do with that. But it's just where he comes onto that front foot so much. You might want to lift that heel up a bit. And then through here, we kind of stay where it's doing whatever it's doing, I guess. But just to get that nice line through there, I guess. Still got the tail. I felt a slight disconnect between this pose and this pose. I feel like you almost want to do. I'm going to stand way away from my mic here, but you almost want to and then look down and then grab it. It kind of feels like he goes, and then he just knows that thing's there and then just goes into that pose. So you could almost break that up by having the eyes and the head kind of lead that down. So he's like, Gah! If that makes sense. I think it does, but who knows? My mic might not even be working at this point. Who knows? So it kind of hits, and then you could have this. Maybe here his head is like turned down. I don't know. I'm not going to try and draw his mouth and stuff, but he's looking down. Would just help tie those two poses together a bit and give you something to break them pose to pose feel up with. But it's a very nice pose. Potentially this is something that again could be just adjusted a little bit just to get that feeling a bit more. One, two, three. And this side could possibly also do with just a bit. Like if he's raised up, it makes sense that he could be on his toes. So maybe you get a little more in there as well. And this would obviously then raise him up just a touch. I mean, in terms of story with this pose, it feels like we are swiping something, and I don't know whether it would be nicer if you felt he was just raging to the air. So he kind of hits that thing over, and then he's like, ah, and then looks down and then attacks that thing, you know? At the moment, it's kind of like he's going, ah, and attacking something, and then, but there's nothing there. So it doesn't really sell as much as if they're, you know, if he's hitting like a pinata or he's hitting the ceiling fan. It's a really low ceiling for a toddler's playroom. But, you know, it just feels like this pose and his action could do with more purpose. And if he's just raging, then it could potentially be a bit more of a raging pose. And if he's hitting that, I feel like you want to go through that. So it's more of like a and then into something else rather than a big like hit and then go into something else. It feels like an intentional hit right now because of the hold, but also because of the the head not feeling so connected to the next pose. You know, that if you had that moment in there where it's kind of like just looking around and like there's something else I need to destroy. I'm Godzilla boy. Ah. So that's something to think about with that bit. I love what you've done here with like the raise up. Feels nice of his foot. I think there's opportunity to so I guess just to talk about breaking up the pose to pose stuff a bit more. Like it would be nice. It's nice that you kind of like follow with the arms here, but for example, you could be in this pose here, coming up into that. So it's like boom, and then follows down after that with like a just something a bit more drag it. I like if you're leading with the head there, it doesn't make sense that the arms then overtake the head halfway through that movement. So I would kind of think about what's leading and following more in this motion. And if you want to lead more with the arms, then I feel like you need to do a bit more of an antic down into this pose. It kind of feels like the arms are just coming through and there's no antic pose necessarily. So you might want to think about how you could maybe do a bit of a hold before the big grab. Like if you got into here and your arms were maybe a bit more terrible. If they were maybe a bit more I'm not going to try and draw the fingers, but just a bit of an antic before then doing that straighten. But obviously that would mean that you'd probably lose some time from up here or add some time if you want to do some more acting in there, get him feeling a bit more crazed and out of control. But then you would need to add some time here for a little beat just to, but not necessarily like 6 frames or anything, maybe just like another 2 frames where you'd have a chance to kind of read that before. But then you do have quite a long hold here, so maybe you could take some time from that and just add some time here as you come down to kind of ease into that motion of grabbing. And then this can just feel a little bit more or a little bit less posy. And I think on this foot, I love it. I just feel like it could be a little cleaner right now. Potentially just like one line here. Let's have a look. Okay. Yeah, there's just potential to clean that up. Maybe not that much. But you see how you kind of have this massive line here. Could just be as simple as that much to get that compression of the shape there. But it's very nice what you're doing with the compression up with that. Could also be that this knee needs to feel like the front of the knee is about here. Kind of feels like you're pushing it way over here right now. And then would probably be nice to have this come up and then feel just a little bit more hold in that, so you get that lead with the body down and foot. So this kind of steps. Let's have a look. And then this is still kind of dragging. So go up here. This could be pushed. See how you kind of get that lead with the hips down? Yeah, I don't know what this ball would be doing at this point. Maybe it's still coming over his head or something. Just to get a little bit more breakup in there. And this is cool. Maybe you want just one more here, so you get a little reversal. This is the ball. This is his head. Let's see how that would look. And then I feel like when you hit the ball on the ground here, this is nice what you have. It would be nice if this then sent the body up. Kind of feels like we get this compression down here. Boom. So we get a down. And it just wants to spring up a bit. I feel like he has more energy than just like a big boom and he's down. It's like he almost wants to like throw down with so much force that he pushes himself up. So you would get this kind of thing. These legs just coming up. I mean, he doesn't have to do like a big jump, but it could be cool. And maybe it would like settle into something a bit more up here. Ooh. Then he could just settle into this pose, which would like having that up and down would be a nice way to naturally get into this down pose for going up. No, I guess that's the take, isn't it? Which we needed to talk about even. So I'd settle into something here, and then you kind of want to just hold this pose. I feel like hold this pose for maybe a bit longer, and just on his face, I think to answer the question about the take at the end, I feel like you want to do the and then and then the look, right? So he throws, he hears something which makes him think. So show the thinking on his face, like a he's like and then or like a just a little look up, or well, you could do an expression change to really just like he's coming out of that like, did I hear something? And then he looks like, oh. So you get action, and then that action is his mom calling his name. And then you get thinking, and then you get the reaction. So if you're holding this, you'd maybe go into just a little, ooh, what was that? And then do the take up. And I think you could potentially just ease this off a little bit just so it's not so dynamic in this pose. And he could be a bit more upright. He feels a bit too dynamic, like compared to what his emotion should be. So he's kind of doing all this crazy stuff, doing his dynamic poses. I feel like in this point, you'd want him to be just a bit more, not default, but a bit more like just goes back into being a boy, and he's like, it's almost like doing and then go, what was that? He's like coming back into himself and dropping the facade of being Godzilla. Potentially have these arms less dynamic as well. Like, to me, it's funny to kind of just go from to just really dropping those arms to the side. You could even just have these down and that. But see what you think. Have a play. Don't necessarily have to drop those to that level. Maybe it's just a little ease off in them, of them. But for me, I feel like you need a beat of the face on the end there, and then go into your big action, the big take. Like facial before body emotion, I guess. It doesn't have to be like a super long and then a big take. It can just be like a he's right. But anyway, thanks very much for getting a review, Lauren. And let me know if anyone needs a review. Go to keyframecoach.com. I'm so bad at selling this stuff. Oh my god. But until next time, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Keyframe Coach, out.